Worldwide Knitting Public Day is an international event started in 2005 by Danielle Landers and takes place on the second Saturday of June each year. It began as a way for knitters to come together and enjoy each other's company. It is the largest knitter-run event in the world. Part of the concept is to show how knitting is more than just grannies sitting by the fire at home. In 2021, there were 175 events in 18 different countries, including 5 in Aotearoa, New Zealand. This video follows an event in Tāmaki Makaurau.
I'm Sue Elliott, and I call a little part of what I do Community String Knitting Adventures, which is about community and knitting and having an adventure. And sort of in about July last year, I noticed a shot on Facebook that some women in Christchurch had decorated the tourist tram, did one round of the track with bunting, and then went off to a cafe. And I didn't think any more about it, and I was driving home up the hill beside the zoo, and the MOTAT tram went by. And I have to say, my first thought was heretical, like, why don't I ring my friend Lissy, ask if she'd like to spend the day on the tram, and maybe we could hijack the tram, make a whole lot of bunting, get on and decorate it. And then I thought, well, that's likely to end in tears and not very practical. So it just grew from there. And that's where the idea came from. And the idea of a sort of moving tableau of knitting and crocheting to celebrate Worldwide Knitting Public Day. And because the trams are free at MOTAT, that people could come and have a great time, and it would be free. And then others who wanted to come in could. And also, because MOTAT is free admission for gold card holders, and that's quite a lot of knitters, even though the demographic has changed a lot, there's still a lot of people who want a day out but can't really afford much of a day out. So that's how we got to here. And then it took off, like the tram.
After I found out that Sue was going to host an event at MOTAT, I knew I wanted to get on board. So I headed down to the Sir George Grey Special Collections and I found this book, Her Excellency's Knitting Book, the first ever knitting book to be locally produced in Aotearoa. It was produced in 1915 under the supervision and direction of Lady Annette Foljambe, Countess of Liverpool, the wife of the Governor-General of New Zealand. This book was designed to encourage people to get back into knitting and to help contribute to the war effort. I figured, if we're knitting on heritage trams, we should have some heritage knitting patterns and reproduce the patterns on some heritage printing presses. So I headed off to the print shop at MOTAT. First step was to modernise the patterns and write them in the type of language we use nowadays. Second step was to make up the individual pieces of lead type to spell out all the letters and special characters. Knitting patterns usually use asterisks to show you when to repeat. But the type cases don't have asterisks, so I made use of special character type. After this comes test printing and then many, many proofs and errors and edits found. We then quickly created a cover page, cut some paper to size, and got the Heidelberg press running and printing the copies. Sadly, I forgot to count how many copies we made altogether, certainly though, several hundred, which all needed to be folded ahead of time. The next step for Sue, Lissy, Rudy and their crew was to take the boxes of bunting they'd collected and get to task. First step, yarn bombing the tram.
So I've really done the organisation and administration with support from Creative Communities Auckland. They've been really supportive. So we got grants for some workshops to make bunting, but really that was a bit ambitious, although we did get a lot of bunting made in the workshops. We did some workshops, so Lissy and Rudy did 3 workshops in Otahuhu Library. I did some at West Auckland Resource Centre where we used yarn that would have gone to the landfill. So it was all rescued from the landfill and turned into art. And then I did the Albert Eden Local Board provided some funding, so we did a workshop during the school holidays. And young kids who couldn't knit or crochet, and we realised we couldn't teach people in that time, they decorated plain bunting that people had knitted. And through a really quite active Facebook presence, we put out for people to knit or crochet, and we just had this extraordinary response. The furthest pieces came from Scotland, that's the furthest north, and the furthest south came from Christchurch. Some from a yarn shop in Kapiti, from somebody who just likes taking part, posted some. So I think I estimated that 150 people have made, decorated bunting, and we also ran 2 mornings where people strung the bunting that had just came as loose flags and packed it all. So that, I think there were more than 30 people involved in doing that. So all up 150 people, and we ended up with, I think, about 350 metres of bunting. And that's hours and hours of work and colour. And the workshops, people shared skills, people learned to crochet, they learned to knit, they started knitting again or crocheting again after many years. Kids learnt basic skills of sewing, cross-stitching, sewing on buttons, making tassels, making pom-poms. And I did one workshop with a class of 6-year-olds at Point Chev School, and they also decorated bunting. So some of it was made and decorated by one maker, and some's a joint effort. So it's been pretty amazing. The youngest person who took part was 3, and the oldest is 87.
Today's the day, Worldwide Knit in Public Day. 5 months of planning has gone into this, and yeah. Our tram drivers for the day were Doug and Paul, who were presented with crocheted hat covers for their motorman caps. The tram quickly filled with knitters, crocheters, well-wishers and hangers-on, as well as the general merry band of normal MOTAT visitors. Lissy and Rudy also ran a knitting and crochet workshop inside MOTAT for anyone to join in or learn some basics.
This project has illustrated everything that I've ever read about the benefits of contemporary knitting. Overcoming isolation, people being able to participate in something bigger than themselves, the joy and benefit of colour.
Very soon the day was done. Months and months of work finally come to an end. This was only possible through the work of literally hundreds of volunteers and of course hundreds and hundreds of the hours of time of the organisers. What will next year look like? Hopefully bigger and better. Only one way to find out though.